The implications of this are frankly nothing short of historic. Over 100 documents that we released on Friday really detail and provide evidence of how this treasonous conspiracy was directed by President Obama just weeks before he was due to leave office.
One loser, you know who it is? Barack Obama. Do you know why? Because his voice doesn't carry weight anymore. He was out there begging, screaming, scolding, everything he did. He no longer carries that weight. Imagine Barack Obama, every day he goes to sleep, he remembers that one dinner that he's talking to Trump, saying you'll never be president, when he did the angry tweets and all this stuff on Jimmy Kimmel or Jimmy Fallon, and he reads the Trump tweet at him, talking about him, he says, at least you'll never be a president.
From the very beginning, Barack Obama carried himself like a man who had stepped straight into history's VIP lounge and never left. The calm smile, the smooth tone, the perfectly measured delivery, every detail was designed to make people believe they were witnessing something extraordinary. To the crowds, he wasn't just a politician, he was a symbol. A modern-day philosopher king who spoke not with words, but with destiny. Every rally felt like a sermon, every line about hope and change delivered like gospel. The media fed the frenzy, turning his campaign into a cultural phenomenon. Magazine covers called him the future. Commentators gushed over his intellect. Celebrities treated him like a rock star. And for millions of Americans desperate for relief from years of political fatigue, Obama seemed like the answer to everything. He was charisma packaged as competence, and people bought the illusion with blind faith. But Patrick Bet-David calls it for what it was, branding, not leadership. He compares Obama to a walking marketing campaign, a man who mastered the art of selling himself as the revolution without ever delivering one. The speeches soared, the crowds cheered, and the cameras flashed, but behind the polished surface was just another politician trained to play the part. Obama wasn't a savior. He was a product. Sleek, polished, and expertly sold. And when Tulsi Gabbard peels back the layers, the illusion shatters even faster. She reminds us that the very qualities people adored, the cool image, the unshakable calm, the sense of unity, were the same tools that masked policies built to serve the establishment. It wasn't transformation. It was theater. And once the performance ended, the audience was left with nothing but empty slogans. The illusion of hope worked brilliantly on stage. But the cracks started showing the moment reality set in.
Think you're Obama, okay? First go from the Obama's lens. Okay. Obamas are sitting there having to hear people compare Kamala to Obama. Crazy. Do you know what that does to Obama? Do you know Obama is sitting there saying, shut the that's what Obama's saying internally.
Director Gabbard, give me your response to what we heard from former President Obama there. He's saying that none of this makes any sense, that this is a distraction. What do you say to that?
It's the art of deflection coming from former President Obama, as well as his friends who are still in Congress today, and Senator Warner and Congressman Jim Himes, really all basically saying that exact same statement, which doesn't actually address the issue that was revealed in great detail in the over 100 documents that we released last.
Obama's presidency wasn't a revolution. It was a launch event. Patrick Bet-David compares it to the iPhone reveal, lines of people waiting, hearts full of hype, convinced the product inside would change everything. But once the box was opened, the reality didn't match the trailer. What looked sleek from the outside was full of the same old glitches the country had seen for decades. Broken promises, recycled policies, and a system that worked beautifully for elites while everyday Americans kept falling behind. Patrick doesn't mince words. To him, Obama was the ultimate salesman, less commander-in-chief, more pitchman-in-chief. A man who perfected the art of delivery but failed to follow through. His soaring lines about hope and unity played like Apple keynote slogans, short, powerful, and memorable, but ultimately hollow. Behind the curtain, the change you could believe in turned into politics as usual. Tulsi Gabbard takes it even further. She points out that Obama didn't just package old politics in a shiny new box. He marketed establishment-friendly policies as if they were bold progress. He campaigned as the man who would end wars, then quietly expanded drone strikes. He promised transparency, then ran one of the harshest crackdowns on whistleblowers in U.S. history. He claimed to challenge the military-industrial complex, but in reality, he gave it a fresh coat of eco-friendly paint and sold it as reform. The illusion worked because Obama was more than a politician, he was a brand. The suit, the speeches, the curated image, it was the political version of a Netflix trailer. Inspirational music, big promises, a storyline that made you believe something epic was coming. But when the show actually started, viewers were stuck with the same tired script. And this is where Patrick and Tulsi agree. Obama wasn't a revolutionary. He was a product rollout. But if the marketing was hollow, the policies told an even darker story.
Shows the following. So you know how you talked about Jerome Powell, what an easy job. You come once a month and he said we're going to increase the rates.
Greatest job there is.
I think this is the one thing they don't talk about. So Barack Obama got elected November 4th. Okay, quantitative easing started November 26th.
Right.
And it stayed for 8 years until you got elected.
Right.
So if you look at that low, pretty much 0% interest rate.
Right.
And then you get elected, right? If you go to January 2016, Rob, for the audience to see that. And then from there, one by one, rates are going up. And then Biden comes in, goes back down to zero to try to save the economy. And then, you know, the rest is obviously history.
Right.
But do you think the average person knows, like, the impact of going to zero?
If Obama's image was built on hope, his foreign policy was built on contradiction. Tulsi Gabbard doesn't hold back. She calls out the glaring hypocrisy of a man who campaigned as the anti-war candidate, then quietly became commander of the most aggressive drone program in history. He didn't just continue the wars he promised to end, he streamlined them, turning combat into something that could be carried out with a joystick and a satellite feed. War was no longer bloody and visible. It was sanitized, remote-controlled, and hidden behind sterile terms like collateral damage. And then there's the Nobel Peace Prize, handed to Obama before he'd even warmed the chair in the Oval Office. To Tulsi, that award became the ultimate irony, a peace prize for the man who escalated conflicts, expanded bombing campaigns, and left entire regions more unstable than before. Under Obama, civilian deaths weren't an unfortunate exception. They became statistics filed away in spreadsheets. The Middle East didn't become safer, it became fractured. Libya descended into chaos. Syria spiraled as red lines were drawn and erased. Instead of delivering peace, Obama perfected the art of making endless war look like progress. Patrick Bet-David slices through it with brutal clarity. He reminds viewers that this wasn't leadership, it was branding. Just as a slick ad can sell a broken product, Obama's speeches sold wars as strategy, even when the results were disastrous. To Patrick, Obama was like a polished commercial, uplifting music, inspiring voiceover, the promise of something transformative. But when the ad ended and the reality set in, all people got was destruction wrapped in empty rhetoric. The so-called peace candidate became the face of permanent conflict, proving that image can cover almost anything, at least for a while. But the wars weren't the only place where Obama's promises collapsed. Back home, the economy told a story that shattered the illusion even further.
Tom, what is the process of Nobel Prize? If he's able to do that, who nominates? Because most of the Nobel winners are on the left.
Nobel Prizes, you can go look this up, are given to an arcane nomination process, and they go into a back room and they decide who they're going to give it to. And the Nobel Peace Prize is basically a political football. You look around the world at people that have really caused peace, and you have Obama made a couple speeches as soon as he was inaugurated in 2009. Oh my goodness, we give it to, for fostering an environment of...
If foreign policy revealed Obama's hypocrisy, the economy exposed his true loyalties. Patrick Bet-David rips into the myth of Obama as the champion of the working class, reminding everyone how quickly, yes, we can turn into, yes, Goldman can. When the 2008 financial crisis crushed millions of families, Obama had a choice: side with the people who lost their homes and livelihoods, or bail out the very institutions that caused the collapse. His decision was clear: Wall Street got salvation, Main Street got crumbs. Everyday Americans watched as banks were rescued with taxpayer money, while they themselves were left drowning in foreclosure notices and unemployment lines. Bonuses flowed to executives, but relief barely trickled down to struggling families. The system that wrecked the economy was not dismantled, it was reinforced, with Obama smiling through press conferences about recovery. Patrick doesn't let that slide. He points out that this wasn't change, it was business as usual, wrapped in inspirational speeches. The man who sold himself as the enemy of big money turned out to be one of its most loyal guardians. Obama's donor list fattened like a Christmas turkey while Americans scraped together pennies to pay mortgages. Hope didn't trickle down, corporate profits did. Tulsi Gabbard drives the knife deeper by exposing how Obama dressed this betrayal in progressive packaging. He claimed he was fighting for the middle class, but in reality, his policies entrenched corporate power. The gig economy grew, wages stagnated, and ordinary workers were left patching the potholes in a system designed to keep them struggling. The illusion of economic progress was just another brand campaign. And while the marketing soared, the reality on the ground told a harsher truth. The working class was sacrificed so Wall Street could thrive. But even at home, Obama's failures weren't just about the economy. His so-called landmark domestic reform was waiting to collapse under its own way.
To try to impact the outcome of the U.S. election leading up to Election Day. The same assessment was made after Donald Trump was elected by the American people as president in 2016, defeating Hillary Clinton. And it wasn't until after that pulled president's daily brief document that the Principals Committee was called in the National Security Council, and President Obama then directed Obama's DNI James Clapper to lead the effort to create this new intelligence community assessment that detailed not if, but how Moscow attempted to influence the outcome of the U.S.
When people look back on Obama's presidency, the Affordable Care Act is often held up as his signature domestic achievement, the crown jewel of hope and change. But Patrick Bet-David and Tulsi Gabbard ripped straight through that illusion, exposing it as another masterclass in branding over results. Obama sold the ACA like it was the bold leap forward America had been waiting for: universal care, fairness, a new system that finally worked for everyone. But once the applause faded and the law rolled out, reality hit hard. Millions were still left uninsured. Premiums skyrocketed. Deductibles crushed families already struggling to get by. Small businesses buckled under mandates they could barely afford. What was promised as sweeping reform felt more like a bureaucratic maze designed to confuse rather than cure. Patrick doesn't sugarcoat it. He calls it what it really was: a government-subsidized advertisement for private insurance companies. Instead of breaking the grip of big insurance, the ACA reinforced it, locking Americans into a system that still prioritized profit over people. It was optics dressed as progress, a headline achievement designed to photograph well but collapse under scrutiny. Tulsi digs deeper, pointing out how Obama strutted around like he had reshaped the entire healthcare system, while in reality, everyday Americans were left paying more for less. For all the speeches about fairness and access, the ACA left families trapped in fine print and broken promises. The so-called reform didn't level the playing field. It tilted it even further in favor of the corporations Obama claimed to restrain. And once again, the performance overshadowed the substance. But if domestic policy was shaky at best, Obama's foreign diplomacy was even more carefully packaged theater, diplomacy that looked genius on paper, but collapsed under the weight of reality.
I couldn't be prouder to endorse you and to do everything we can to get you through this election and into the Oval Office.
Oh my goodness. The words you have spoken and the friendship that you have given over all these years mean more than I can express.
And we're going to have some fun.
Both.
Say it.
It means so much. And we're going to have some fun with this too.
That's right. So obviously, she's not a professional actor.
If the Affordable Care Act exposed Obama's failures at home, the Iran nuclear deal revealed how much of his foreign policy was political theater. To his supporters, it was hailed as a stroke of genius, diplomacy over war, peace achieved through dialogue, a triumph of pen and paper over bombs and bullets. But Patrick Bet-David strips away the applause and calls it what it really was, a photo op designed to polish Obama's international image. On the surface, the deal looked historic. Iran agreed to pause its nuclear program, inspectors were allowed in, and the world's media applauded the bold peacemaker in the White House. But under the fine print, billions in frozen assets were released, Tehran's influence across the region grew, and America's allies felt betrayed. Instead of restraining the regime, the deal gave it breathing room and leverage. Tulsi Gabbard highlights the deeper problem. The deal wasn't built to last. It was temporary, fragile, and riddled with loopholes. True leadership would have demanded solutions that strengthen stability for the long term. Instead, Obama got what he wanted most: headlines that painted him as a global statesman. It was diplomacy crafted for applause, not durability. And the irony is that Obama didn't stop playing power games once he left the Oval Office. Tulsi points to how his influence shaped the Democratic Party itself. When the 2020 primary threatened to crown Bernie Sanders as an outsider challenger, Obama quietly pulled the strings to rally support behind Joe Biden. For a man who claimed to rise above the machine politics of Washington, Obama revealed himself as the machine, guiding outcomes behind the curtain while pretending to stay above the fray. Patrick drives the point home. Obama wasn't the great peacemaker or reformer his branding promised. He was the ultimate strategist of appearances, ensuring every move looked like progress, even if the results told another story. But behind all the speeches and deals, one thing became clear. Obama didn't heal the country. He deepened the very divisions he promised to erase.
After President Trump had already gotten elected, this is not a Democrat or Republican issue. This is an issue that is so serious it should concern every single American because it has to do with the integrity of our democratic republic. What we saw occur here, as the documents we released detailed, was that we had a sitting president of the United States and his cabinet and leadership team, quite frankly, who were not happy with the fact that President Trump had won the election, that the American people had chosen Donald J. Trump to be the next president commander-in-chief of the United States.
For years, Obama was sold as the great unifier, the man who would finally bridge the divides of race, class, and politics in America. But Tulsi Gabbard argues the reality was the opposite. Instead of healing divisions, Obama quietly institutionalized them. His strategy thrived on subtle separation, on turning politics into a constant game of identity categories. Americans stopped seeing each other as neighbors and started seeing each other as checkboxes on a demographic chart. Patrick Bet-David adds that Obama mastered the art of making half the country feel enlightened while dismissing the other half as backwards. That smug moral superiority didn't close gaps, it widened them. And the backlash it created wasn't accidental. It paved the way for Donald Trump's rise. For every voter who felt inspired, there was another who felt insulted, written off, and pushed further away from Washington's self-congratulating elite. Obama promised unity, but delivered division dressed up as progress. His version of leadership wasn't about pulling people together, it was about managing them in groups, each defined by identity rather than shared purpose. And while the speeches soared, the fractures deepened. Tulsi takes it further. Obama wasn't leading as a commander-in-chief. He was performing as an influencer-in-chief. Every public moment was carefully curated, every appearance staged for impact. Singing a line of Al Green at a rally, shooting hoops with cameras rolling, dropping a perfectly timed joke, these weren't accidents. They were part of the brand. The image mattered more than the substance, and governance took a back seat to performance. The result? A political culture more obsessed with branding than results, more interested in optics than outcomes. Obama didn't fix the divisions, he made them permanent. And as Patrick and Tulsi point out, when a nation is ruled by appearances, the cracks beneath the surface only get deeper. But the story doesn't end when Obama left office. Because once the presidency was over, the performance took on a new stage, and this time, it was all about cashing in.
It was an inconvenient truth. The president's daily brief article was pulled. It has never been published until we released it about a week and a half ago. Instead, this new intelligence assessment was ordered by President Obama that contradicted directly every other intelligence assessment that had been published prior to the election, as well as assessments that had been pushed forward after the election.
If Obama's presidency was about performance, his post-presidency became the encore. Except this time, the stage lights were paid for by Wall Street, Silicon Valley, and Hollywood. Patrick Bet-David calls it exactly what it looks like: one long, carefully monetized brand extension. The man who once railed against corporate greed now cashes in on six-figure speaking gigs hosted by the same bankers he pretended to fight. He signs Netflix deals worth millions, churns out memoirs with record-breaking advances, and headlines luxury events where ticket prices cost more than what many of his supporters make in a month. Obama didn't drain the swamp. He turned it into a private golf course, then sold memberships to the highest bidder. Patrick compares him to Tony Robbins of politics, a motivational speaker disguised as a statesman, endlessly repackaging old speeches for a new paying audience. The Hope and Change brand didn't disappear. It evolved into a profitable empire. The difference is that now the product isn't policies or promises. It's access, influence, and entertainment.